and that's the chip that's on the motherboard. It will also show up as just a blank screen. The screen will come on, it won't flash, it'll be solid, but it'll be just one color. Or, in this case, we have a black and white TV, so you cannot see the colors, but it'll just be a single color like red or blue or green, and it'll stay there. That also, chances are, it's a bad PPU. So what do you do in that case? Well, let me get a motherboard over here that I can work with. As I mentioned earlier, this is a CPU. It's Nintendo's part RP2A03G. This is the PPU, and that's Nintendo part RP2C02G. So this is 3G and this is a 2G. They are a member of the 6500 CPU family. Unsolder, using the method I showed you for taking out the 4021 chip in this controller, unsolder the bad PPU, replace it with a socket. I always recommend you replace it with a socket. That way, if you put it in and you burn it up as you put it in, you don't double your work. You can pop it out, and it also you can't ruin an IC socket by overheating it most of the time. So I socket these, and then I'll put a PPU chip in its place. Okay, so that's the second problem that occurs with the motherboard that you can fix. Now, I wanted to mention earlier that this little chip right here, it's got a label on it, the 3193A. It's called the CIC chip. Now you'll note that chip, that CIC chip, is the exact same CIC chip found on the game cartridge. That chip and this chip work hand in hand. Here's what occurs. The motherboard generates a 4 megahertz cycle, 4 megahertz, 4 million cycles per second signal. It pulses it into the CIC chip on the motherboard. The CIC chip on the motherboard sends it out directly into this, the CIC chip on the game cartridge. The CIC chip on the game cartridge then does something with the signal. I think what it does is divides by 100 and pulses, does a one-shot every 100 cycles. It then sends that signal back out, its pins, to this one. And pin 7 is hooked up to pin 7, I believe, of this chip. If any of those signals aren't there, this chip, the CIC chip, is tied into the reset circuitry of your motherboard. So what occurs if you get a cartridge and it's an unauthorized cartridge without the CIC chip on it, what will occur is you'll get a blinking screen every so many pulses. The Nintendo will reset itself. So you hit the reset button. That's one way of resetting the system. That's a manual reset. But Nintendo also put in a secret circuitry that will reset automatically if that chip is not present on the game cartridge. Now there's a way around that. The way around that is if you desolder this chip and remove it completely take that chip out or cut it out and pull it out, the Nintendo will still operate properly. You'll still be able to put a cartridge in and it will still operate properly. However, you won't be able to reset it. You won't be able to hit this reset button and reset it. You can turn it off, turn it back on to start the game over again, but you cannot hit reset with this chip removed and have it start all over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this unit up, and I've got this special cartridge here where the CIC chip is there, and I'm going to pop the CIC chip out and show you what occurs without the CIC chip in it. Alright, I have this unit set up. It's a good motherboard. Everything's fine on the motherboard, but I've got Bayou Billy, the game Bayou Billy, loaded in here, and you'll notice that it's operating fine. The light stays on constant, and everything's fine. Now I'm going to turn the power off, and all I'm going to do is I've socketed the CIC chip. I'm going to pull off the CIC chip, okay? And now I'm going to turn it back on again. and Bio Billy comes on, but every so many cycles of the clock, because that special Nintendo chip is not on the game cartridge, it senses that it's not there and it resets every so many cycles. So that's what you'll get. Okay? So we turn it off, and I'm going to put the chip back on again. Turn it back on again, and you'll notice that everything's fine. So that's the symptom that you'll get if you try to use an unauthorized cartridge. Here, I have a unit I just got in that's got a bad connector on the inside. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this in time-lapse photography and let you watch me take it apart. Once I get down to the connector, I'm going to give you detailed instructions on how to fix it. Show you how to... Okay, I have a few minutes left to show you how to rebuild the connector. Okay, the first thing I do, as I mentioned earlier, is take the bottom part and you scrub it off with one of these scrubbers. Cleans these bottom connectors. Take the top part and also scrub it. Also, it helps get out any dog hairs or anything that might be in there. You can even take one of the edges like that and scoop out any dog hairs or lint or dust or dirt that might be in there. Rub it back and forth. Visually inspect for any oxidized connectors. There aren't any. So the next thing you need to do is the rebuilding process, and here we go. Now what you're going to need for this is a drill press, a soldering iron, some fishing line. What I use is some 20-pound test fishing line, okay? And then I've taken some 20,000 steel rod, push rod that I got at Ace Hardware and cut into 6-inch lengths. And then I pounded and flattened the end of one. So I have a long needle that looks like this. The first thing you do is you be twofold. We want to get those connectors back to where they should be so they're making good contact on the game cartridge as it goes in. And number two, we want to reinforce it so it never recedes again. Okay, and that's the purpose of this whole thing. The bottom ones are relatively simple. I take this piece of steel wire that I've got and I flatten the end on. And I just put it underneath each one of the connectors one by one and gently pry up each connector. Okay? Pry it up back to where it's higher than the ones around it. And don't really crank it up. It should just be above. You'll notice there's a little plastic fin in between each one of these. It should be just above the plastic fin. The blunted end of this wire, and inserted it under each one of these and bent them up just a little. Not a lot, but just a little. You can see how well you've done by inserting that and looking the other side. Some of these are a little too high and you can push back on this side to get them back to go back down again. But they're free to move on this side when you insert the cartridge and it moves around. So you won't have much of a problem on this side. Just make sure that they're clean. The top side, again, is a different story. They're real tough to get to. They're recessed. So what we're going to do, as I mentioned earlier, we go 9 millimeters back and 4 millimeters down on either side. 9 back, 4 down. We're going to take our hot soldering iron and we're going to, right where that junction is, we're going to burn just a little starter hole. And some of you may want to use a scratch hole or something, but don't pound it because that stuff can crack. It's hot. It's hard and will crack. So I use a soldering iron and I burn a little hole there. Now I'm going to unplug the soldering iron so we don't burn anything up here. So now you see we've got a starter hole here on either end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to the drill press and I'm going to drill a 3/8 inch hole in each side. Now it's a little tricky there because you only want to go 3/8 inch deep. A 3/8 inch hole and 3/8 inch deep. If you go too far, you'll interfere with these connectors and screw up the connector. So I'm going to show you the drill now. Alright, now I'm going to explain what I'm going to do first, because when I turn the drill on, it's a little too loud for you to hear. I'm going to use this polishing as a little buffer in case I need to